Wow. Got so many thoughts, man. Hey, you know what keeps coming back to me the most though? Is, oh, now I can hear myself better. You know what keeps coming back to me the most? Is how at this point in their career, and at this point in the development of classic rock, this being 1970, so the late 60s, The Who represents a moving forward of all the bands, especially from the British invasion, and around that mid, especially later period of the 60s. You got to look at The Who and say, wow, these guys really are a representation of what to expect going forward into the 70s. Wouldn't you get that impression? I mean, the Beatles, maybe if you had a really, really good polarity about them, they were kind of tapering off. They were certainly plateaued. Of course, Led Zeppelin was coming in, and there were other great bands coming in, but The Who, they're so amplified. You had to look at them as the forerunners, leading you in, giving you the impression, leading you into what to expect going forward. And then, like I said, Zeppelin showed up, and then Queen shows up, and I'm sure that they got a great amount of their cue from The Who, right? Rhymes. Don't hate the player, hate the game. So, from 63, 64, being the early stage of the 60s, of the British invasion specifically, and then you've got the 65, which is the middle, and I'm looking at it like in the beginning you had the Beatles and the Hollies, Jerry and the Pacemakers and the like, and then in the middle part you had your Stones and your Yardbirds, and then as it started to progress a little bit more, then you've got The Who coming in to lead you on. So then you got The Who taking over from that later part of the British invasion and leading you now into an occupation. The Beatles were already there, their music has been changing, and so now there is an occupation level, there's a plateauing. And The Who, with this performance, you had to have come off of this with the impression of, man, these guys are leading us into a very, very exciting time. I'm excited as hell. So coupled with the likes of Cream, Hendrix, The Doors for sure, Zeppelin coming in, there was a great exciting time. If you were really paying attention, if you were really inclined to the atmosphere of music and classic rock, you had to have been really, really excited. And The Who was a really big part of that. Let me know if I'm right. Let me know if I'm tapping into the mood, the atmosphere, the feeling in the air of what's to come, the excitement factor, because they're dropping you some serious impressions of a great progressive sound. They're giving you energy. They're giving you great musicianship, separating themselves vastly from the earlier British invasion bands. And they're giving you harmony. They're giving you each individual, giving you something of essence about them. They can go from soft rock, hard rock, into metal, into progressive rock, and just complete that loop in that circle. Hey man, I bet you these guys were, if we were to line up all of the acts from 1970 going forward where it comes to rock, classic rock, and ask them who were your great inspirations to help you to formulate your sound, I bet you 90% would say definitely coming from The Who. They had a big part in that influence. You know what I'm saying? This is a landmark achievement, and it's a starting and jumping off point of influence for so many others. You don't even have to tell me that. I don't even need to know much about classic rock, which I don't. But even in my limited capacity, I at least would be able to come to that conclusion just by listening to this. This was a masterful piece of work. And let me ask you another question. This is one of those questions where I really get slain sometimes. I know what questions gets me in trouble, and this will probably be one of those. But here goes anyway. Their live sound is so good. How does this compare to other bands, other great live acts? When you're talking about the greatest live acts of all time, who is in that category? That's where I don't know my classic rock well enough to be able to even conjure up who. The only other person I can think of is Peter Frampton, only because I did a reaction and I remember reading in the bio profile that it's heralded as one of the best live performances. So give me a top listing of, in your impression, who is in that category of the top. Is The Who in the top 5? Where do they compare to Peter Frampton? Is that even a fair comparison? Am I pissing anyone off with this question? Let me know. And give me your top 5. Now remember, you're dealing with someone who doesn't know, especially about live performances. And you know, of course the Allman Brothers are coming to mind as well. But I want to hear it from you. What's your personal list? What's your personal take? And where does The Who fit in on that list, on that scale? After listening to this, I know that they do. I know that they have to be in your top 5. So educate me a little bit with that. That is the big takeaway that I'm getting, that big impression after listening to this album that I'm getting. So I've got questions and I've got these impressions. So let me know if I'm in the ballpark of being connected to the atmosphere of classic rock, especially where The Who's influence is concerned. I'm going to stop talking now because this is the sort of thing that I can talk about all day, but I'm not going to. So let me just do a little background here, man. The Who live at Leeds. I'm on their Wikipedia page here, and yeah, quite a lot of info, a decent amount. But I'll just read the top part, a little background, and then jump to the bottom. Yeah, and skip all the details about song breakdowns and stuff. So let's do a little background here, man. All right, Live at Leeds. Live at Leeds is the first live album by English rock band The Who. It was recorded at the University of Leeds Refectory on the 14th of February in 1970, and is their only live album that was released while the group were still actively recording and performing with their best known lineup of Roger Daltrey, Pete Townshend, John Entwistle, and Keith Moon. The Who were looking for a way to follow up their 1969 album Tommy, and had recorded several shows on tours supporting that album. And that was really cool, having bits of Tommy sprinkled into this performance here, man. The My Generation extended jam, as I'll call it. Where was I, man? Sorry, I lost my damn way. The Who were looking for a way to follow up their 1969 album Tommy, and had recorded several shows on tours supporting that album, but didn't like the sound. Consequently, they booked the show at Leeds University along with the one at Hull City Hall the following day, specifically to record a live album. 6 songs were taken from the Leeds show, and the cover was pressed to look like a bootleg recording. The sound was significantly different from Tommy and featured hard rock arrangements that were typical of the band's live shows. The album was released in May of 1970 by Decca and MCA in the US by Track and Polydor in the UK. It's been reissued on several occasions and in several different formats. Since its release, Live at Leeds has been cited by several music critics as the best live recording of all time. Wow. Yeah, again, give me your top 5 and let me know where the Who fits in, even if they're in your top 5. I'm sure they are. Background. Pete Townshend used a Hyatt CP103 Super Who guitar amp on the recording. By the end of the 60s, particularly after releasing Tommy in May of '69, The Who had become cited by many as one of the best live rock acts in the world. According to biographer Chris Charlesworth, a sixth sense seemed to take over, leading them to a kind of rock nirvana that most bands can only dream about. Unquote. Definitely a part of that would be the presence of Keith Moon, because as I was listening to him, he had impeccable timing. He knew when to come in. He knew when to just break it off. That's fantastic timing on his part. If you are a drummer and you got that kind of timing, I can see why this critic is saying that it was almost a sixth sense. Definitely, it in part, huge part, coming on the part from Keith Moon's. Geez, man, I can't think today. Keith Moon's contribution. That's what I'm looking for. So, the band were rehearsing and touring regularly, and Townshend had settled on using the Gibson SG Special as his main touring instrument. It allowed him to play faster than did other guitars. He began using Hyatt amplifiers that allowed him to get a variety of tones simply by adjusting the guitar's volume level. It's interesting. The group were concerned that Tommy had been promoted as high art by manager Kit Lambert, and though their stage show stood in equal importance to that of the album's rock opera. Jeez, man. Let's try this again, man. Damn. Their stage show stood in equal importance to that album's rock opera format. There we go. The group returned to England at the end of '69 with a desire to release a live album from concerts recorded earlier in the US. However, Townshend balked at the prospect of listening to all the accumulated recordings to decide which would make the best album, and, according to Charlesworth, instructed sound engineer Bob Pridden to burn the tapes. You know, they just wanted to go in a completely different direction, reinvent themselves. Good call on his part. 2 shows were consequently scheduled, one at the University of Leeds and the other in Hull, for the express purpose of recording and releasing a live album. The Leeds concert were booked and arranged by Simon Brogan, who later became an assistant manager on tour with Jethro Tull. The shows were performed on the 14th of February in 1970 at Leeds and on the 15th of February at Hull, but technical problems with the recordings from the Hull gig. The bass guitar had not been recorded on some of the songs. It made it all the necessary for the show from the 14th to be released as the album. Townshend subsequently mixed the live tapes, intending to release a double album, but ultimately chose to release just a single LP with 6 tracks. Yeah, and that's what we've listened to. A number of patrons said to me, make sure that it's the LP that you're listening to and not the, I believe it's the deluxe. There's also a deluxe. And it's great, because I heard all of the phonographic little pops and scratches going on. The full show opened with Entwistle's Heaven and Hell and included most of Tommy, but these were left off the album in place of earlier hits and more obscure material. According to David Hepworth, because there was no microphone pointed towards the audience, crowd noise was a distant presence, as distant as the traffic outside, making the recording a faithful account of what the band played and nothing more. Yeah, I hear that. I was really starting to kind of miss the crowd background, and I was wondering, why are they so slow in their response? Well, it's because you could barely hear them. That's why. Yeah, all right, that makes sense. Definitely, I'm sure that they would not make that error going forward with live performances. Okay, man, let's skip down to accolades. Just one more paragraph here. Accolades. Live at Leeds has been cited as the best live rock recording of all time by the Daily Telegraph, The Independent, the BBC, Q Magazine, and Rolling Stone. In 2003, it was ranked number 170 on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time, maintaining the rating in a 2012 revised list. A commemorative blue plaque has been placed at the campus venue at which it was recorded, the University Refectory. On the 17th of June in 2006, over 36 years after the original concert, The Who returned to perform at the Refectory at a gig organized by Andy Kershaw. Kershaw stated the gig was among the most magnificent I've ever seen. A Rolling Stones readers poll in 2012 ranked it as the best live album of all time, and it was voted number 356 in Colin Larkin's all-time top 1,000 albums. All right, so that is Wikipedia Song Fact Info, man, on Live at Leeds. Definitely one of the best, and like I said, I haven't heard a lot of live stuff, but yeah, you can't do better than this, man. This was really, really good. And if it's I would say someone's first introduction to The Who, it's a damn good introduction. And of course, going back to their earlier stuff in '65 when they debuted with Can't Explain, and just 5 short years later, man, look at the sound that they're producing. And you got to say to yourself, whoa, okay, it's been 5 years. Definitely, 1, these guys are a force. 2, they're here to stay for quite a while. 3, their music has progressed so much from that kind of innocent teenage sounding sound from Can't Explain now all the way to this fantastic hard rock, progressive, heavy sounding, almost metal sounding sound, and then going back and forth again. And they have that ability to switch things up. And let me say, the musicianship, man, would have definitely given you an indication of just how good they are and how strong a force they are, and their lasting power. They had all the tools necessary to really blaze a trail into the 70s. So having that impression about them in the late 60s to the early 70s as a Who fan must have been really, really exciting for you. Must have been like, wow, man. Yeah, these guys are not just a flash fad British invasion band. They are definitely a part of this occupation, and they are going to be leading the way, leading the charge into the 70s, and they're going to be rubbing shoulders with the likes of the Stones, the Beatles, and Led Zeppelin, so it must have been a great and exciting time for you guys in respect to all of the music back then, and especially the identity of the British bands, because they were past the British invasion stage, now going into a progressive stage, now at the foot of the 70s going forward. So with a lineup of these excellent bands going forward, it must have been a really, really excellent time, an exciting time for a lot of you who were focused specifically on the British act and the British sound and everything like that where it comes to rock and classic rock. Very interesting. You can do an entire documentary on this. I'm sure there's been a bunch of documentaries done just on that alone. Yeah, man. The musicianship of The Who is incredible. Where does Pete rank on your list of great guitar players? It's as if I haven't really paid a lot of attention to him. But definitely after this My Generation extended jam, you got to give him his props. All of them. They were all fantastic. They kept up to each other. They were really, really good. And definitely each one of them would definitely make it on the list in their respective arts as to the best of. So where does Pete rank for you in your list of guitarists? Is he in your top 5? Is he in your top 10? Give an account for why you ranked him at whatever particular number you're ranking him, just to give me a little bit of perspective as well. All right, man. So what I'm going to do going forward is, again, I'm going to send you guys out a questionnaire / poll and get some feedback from you. I'm talking to my patrons here real quick as to what to react to next. And then I'll go from there again. It's great. Thank you very much for indulging me with this, getting my cue. What you're doing is you're kind of like my Moses. You're parting that sea, giving me a trail to follow. Because man, I could you imagine me trying to do this all by myself, trying to, obviously knowing, okay, their discography between their live and their studio albums are just so vast, I wouldn't even be able to scratch the surface just given 1 month. So that's my dilemma right there, where to start, where to bounce around to get the key principal things about them. So yeah, without your leading me into this, I would have been lost, and I was. So thank you very much again, patrons. So I'm going to send you my questionnaire, my poll. Wait for that. I'm going to upload this. It's going to be following this shortly after, and let me know what my next reaction will be. And I don't have to start work until later in the afternoon, so I'll be able to jump on the next reaction first thing in the morning. So if you could get that to me as soon as you can, and then I should be able to get on that right away and probably post it before I have to leave for my afternoon shift, which is around noon Pacific time. So I would like to pop that off first thing in the morning. Okay. Just giving you an outline of my life here, what Wayne's World entails. So man, hey, that was great. I am blown away. And you were right, every single one of you. It's something that I had to experience, and I'm glad that it was in that order, where right after Tommy, and I could understand what they were doing, where they were going with it, and how that extended jam, I enjoyed it a lot more. I'm talking about the My Generation jam. So that was really excellent, man. Fantastic. Yeah, man, a 5 out of 5 if I've ever heard a live album being deserving of that. And again, their live sound. Where do you put The Who in regards to live, best live ever, that sort of thing? I know of Peter Frampton, his accomplishments with his live album. Of course, Rush, right? Who else, with The Who now, who else do you put in that top 5, top 10 category? Give me your list, man, and tell me why you've ranked The Who on that list, and go from there. Anyways, I'm gonna bounce. You guys have a good day. Hope you enjoyed this reaction, and patrons, wait for my poll, and I'll get on the next one. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.